Intro. Over 120 years ago, we saw the start of the 20th century, but specifically, we saw the year 1900. A lot happened in the 20th century that we still see today, but we can take a look back at the decades individually. This is just going to be an overview of how the world changed during specific decades. And I won't go into everything that happened because that would be impossible, but I think it's a good thing to note specifics. Specifics being anything with major geopolitical changes or leadership, any major revolutions, and some science if it's still seen to this day. Maybe some fun stories in between if they're cool. In the year 1900, McKinley was still the President of the United States and had his tariffs enacted prior to this. Don't worry, they were still bad back then because they were the exact same as now. For the same reasons, too. The economy at least got a little better as they tried to open trade with China, which is really good. Nothing else specifically happened in the US yet in 1900. Now moving across to see the China, let's see how they're doing. And they're doing rebellions. This time, the Boxer Rebellion. It rages on throughout the whole year since it's not over yet, but it sure does reach its peak when it comes to how big it is. Hopefully that ends soon, but other than these two things and the Boer War in Britain, nothing much is happening. In terms of science, we see Max Planck publish his works on quantized energy, which says that energy isn't continuous but exists in little packets and released in the form of electromagnetic radiation. We also got to see the first Zeppelin flight in Germany, which at the time was really innovative since people had no way of going in the skies really. By the way, the difference between a Zeppelin and a blimp is that a Zeppelin is more rigid than a blimp. Its shape is kept differently than a blimp since a blimp is more loose with how it uses gas pressure to maintain its shape. In terms of stuff that unites the world during this time, the first Olympics held outside of Greece happened. They happened in Paris and the winner was, shockingly, France. Who would have thought that would have happened? Anyways, we saw the first escalator at the Paris World Fair, which is more of a science exhibition. Let's check back in on the United States on 2 days, May 3rd and September 6th. Oh, and it's not looking good for them. Oh no, the Great Fire of 1901 and William McKinley is dead. Not a good sign for the country. William McKinley gets replaced by Theodore Roosevelt, and Miami kinda just gets rebuilt over time. Let's go across the Pacific Ocean, and the Commonwealth of Australia is formed. Day 1, too. That's a speed run for important events. Anyways, now that they're separated from Britain, and sort of, not really, let's look at what they're doing. By God, Queen Victoria II is dead. Don't know how they're going to necessarily recover from that. A lot of deaths this year, it seems. Alright, let's take a little bit of a breather since China's Boxer Rebellion is over. That's good. Hopefully, nothing more happens in that region for a while. Anyways, King Edward VII takes the throne in Britain. He's just in time to see the first trolley bus be fully built in Germany, luckily in Königstein. Honestly, a lot of stuff happening over there in Europe. Luckily, if you're into frats, Virginia has you covered. Specifically, Richmond and Farmville founding two new fraternities like their Pokemon. First, we have Sigma Pi Epsilon from Richmond on November 1st, and then we have Alpha Sigma Alpha from Farmville on November 15th. Luckily, they can party as soon as the US starts building the Panama Canal. Alzheimer's was founded when Auguste Dere saw Dr. Alois Alzheimer's. She came in with a form of dementia, but also had insomnia. Alzheimer's tried putting her in isolation for a while, but it didn't work. This will later be found to have a genetic cause in it. Now onto a more happier note, we would see the first transatlantic cable made, making it possible to communicate from the US to Europe on a cable. The first message sent was just the letter S. But before this, we see the Australian Parliament enact the Immigration Restriction Act of 1901 there, which basically said if you weren't European, no thank you. Now luckily, we also see Walgreens formed. I don't know what we would have done if it wasn't formed. It would have been over for us, honestly. And there's a train crash at the start of the year in 1902. Magnificent, really. Anyways, there's also an incident in Japan that has 199 people killed in a military exercise. This was near the top of Mount Hakoda. Luckily, the Anglo-Japanese alliance was signed. This states that if Japan or the UK go to war with any eastern region in the east, like Russia, then the other would otherwise stay neutral. It also recognizes that China and Korea are independent nations, kind of, but luckily for not that area. The Berlin U-Bahn is opened underground, so a little bit of a big deal. And at the Battle of Tweebosch in South Africa, the Boer win against the British by killing 200 men and capturing a general, though the Second Boer War is not won yet. Then a young Stalin leads a revolution with Georgian workers, which gets into a little battle with the police. Other than that atrocity, you can now watch movies, though, because the first movie theater opens in LA. But that's for mainly American people, which in May doesn't mean people from Cuba, since they gain independence from the US in that month as well. Other than Cuba separating from the US, the Second Boer War ends in the same month, so big strides in the world. Skipping forward a little bit to July, since June isn't full of a lot of plot, we see the end of the Philippine-American War. Looks like everyone is getting to be peaceful, at least for a little bit. This is what we call progress in the right direction. Then Theodore Roosevelt gets in a car, pretty cool I guess, but moving on we see Mount Pelee explode in Martinique. This caused over 1,000 people to die. They sadly weren't able to see the first science fiction movie though, which is a pretty short one. That one being A Trip to the Moon. Even though it's an interesting movie, don't be worried if you need another story. That story being the origin of the teddy bear. Teddy Roosevelt refused to shoot a bear that was tied up, and so it got to live. We'll have to see where that goes. Then the Aswan Dam is built on the Nile River. Other than that, and the first telegraph cable across the Pacific Ocean. Not too much happened this year, other than that. Bam! Edward VII is made Emperor of India. Bam! The first west to east transatlantic radio broadcast was made. And that's all of January, really. Not too much, but then we get another empty month of the year. February of 1903, specifically only having two events. We first see the end of the Venezuelan crisis, which was a naval blockade around Venezuela. After the Washington Protocols are developed and signed by the UK, Germany, and Italy, Guantanamo Bay is leased to the US from Cuba. But don't forget that teddy bear idea, because those get released during this period as well. What a marketable toy for real on God. Luckily though, in Europe, if you wanted to get from Berlin to Baghdad, you may have the opportunity to. The agreement to build a railway starts during this year, but the progression to see it completed would take a little bit. But while you wait for that, you could go to the newly opened University of Puerto Rico. But if that's also not your thing, instead you want to go to the trades, you can help build the possible Panama Canal, which gets a treaty approved by the US Senate. Don't be fooled, the Colombian Senate rejected the treaty, so it's still just in the heads of the people. But then we have the tragedy in the Russian Empire. The first of their anti-Jewish protests happened. No. The Kishinev pogrom. 47 people were killed because it took the police and military 3 days to actually intervene, which is a long time. The only reason it took 3 days was because they didn't try to intervene until then. So it started on Easter and sadly lasted too long. But also in Alberta, 70 to 90 died in a rock slide. But on a more positive note, there's more races that you can watch. The Paris-Madrid race also started in this year, which is a car race from the first part of the name to the second part of the name. RIP to King Obrenovic and Queen Draga of Serbia though. They are kinda gone because of the Black Hand organization. It makes sense they would do something bad. They are a secret military organization. Anyways, we do see the founding of the Ford Motor Company as well. But that kinda doesn't matter now, really. Hold on. Hold your horses for that one. But in terms of better transportation, the first Tour de France is held, which means bicycles are actually relevant around this time. The British take over the Fulani Empire and there's an explosion in Tewksbury, Massachusetts. No biggie. Speaking of fires, let's check on Paris. And the metro might be on fire. But luckily, if they really wanted to come to the US, they could go to Texas State University, where there is no fires. But if you want to drive to Texas State University, you'll now need a license plate. That's right, first license plates were made en masse on September 1st, 1903. Other than that, Cars are still for only rich people, really. But anyways, Panama then claims itself independent from Colombia, then 10 days later the US supports it. The Bolsheviks and the Mensheviks are also formed. These two parties are from Russia's Democratic Labor Party and mean majority and minority in, you guessed it, Russian. Before we get to more transportation, we can't forget about the Boston Americans winning the first World Series. Okay, now that we have mentioned that, we can talk about the Wright brothers. They fly the first airplane with a petrol engine this year to round it all off. Help! Help! I need a signal for help. CQD, or whatever it may be. Don't know what it means, but it means people have to help me. Anyways, I would probably be using this maybe in a fire or something. Speaking of which, Alsund. The Alsund fire destroyed a lot of buildings in the town of Norway, which caused a lot of people to be without shelter. With the abundance of industrialization, we're seeing a lot more fires, kind of, with no control. Especially with this one in Baltimore, 31 hours for 1,500 buildings, so almost 50 buildings per hour, but no time to worry about that. Or the Madison, Wisconsin fire. We have a war to worry about. That war in question being the Russo-Japanese War, which was started by the Japanese. This happened when they attacked the little region in China near Russia called Manchuria. They shouldn't have done that because that's a major war area. Anyways, the Panama Canal area gets purchased for $10 million by the US. The first political document made in a cylinder is also made in Germany. Britain defeats soldiers in Tibet, and then in the US, the Mormon Church is formed. Then the UK and France sign an agreement that makes their relationship a lot better. But in other news, the Longacre Square is renamed to the Times Square because of the New York Times, like the magazine. Luckily, though, the fire in Toronto doesn't kill anyone, just more of downtown Toronto. Luckily, on Star Wars Day, the US starts working on the Panama Canal, but also Rolls-Royce founders Charlie Rolls and Henry Royce, yes, those are their real names, meet up. The first train to hit over 100 miles per hour is also achieved in the UK. But wait, let's check in on Japan. 1 ship, 2, 3 ships are sunk on one single day. Don't worry, one of them won't be known about until after a year passes. But that's not all. FIFA is formed. This is a big win for the soccer community, but also Alpha Gamma Delta is formed, which is a sorority formed at Syracuse right before the International Alliance of Women was founded. Also, Nikolai Barbakov is assassinated in Helsinki. But also, in news around this time, in the Scandinavian region, is the SS Norge, a ship that sinks near a rock islet island, so it's called the Rockall. But don't worry if you can't get to Europe for the Olympics. They're in St. Louis this year for the 3rd modern Olympics. The US kind of wins it, though, since they actually had a lot of athletes there. The British then took a little more of Tibet on their little conquest, just conqueror things. The Japanese failed to charge into Port Arthur, but luckily, in irrelevant news to them, Ismael Montes becomes president of Bolivia. You can tell him apart by his mustache. That's pretty common in this time period. Luckily for people in Tibet, the Dalai Lama signed the Anglo-Tibetan Agreement, and also there's a study that relates to important stuff at this time in the US. That study is about alcohol and cardiovascular disease. Now, other than that, brace yourself, it's going to be a lot. Phi Delta Epsilon fraternity opened at Cornell for medicine. Alpha Kappa Psi is opened at NYU for business. And Theta Tau is opened for engineering in the University of Minnesota. You got that? Okay, good. Don't care. Anyways, Russia accidentally attacks Britain ships because they thought they were Japanese ships. Panama and Uruguay also established good relationships, just in time for the 1904 election. Theodore wins. Luckily, he gets to still be president when the first demo of the Caterpillar trucks are formed. Lastly, a new fraternity is made. Pi Kappa Pi is formed in the College of Charleston. You could also drink Canada Dry Ginger now at the first New Year's Eve event as well. Congrats on making it through the year. Russia surrenders Port Arthur to Japan. Also good news, the Supreme Court has made it so that the government can help with monopolies and make sure that they don't happen as often. The Battle of Mukden happens in Manchuria and goes on for a few days. 6 days later, Russia kind of gets defeated once at Manchuria. Kind of an L, NGL, gonna lie. The Tsar of Russia, Tsar Nicholas II creates the Duma, which is the Russian thing for legislature. Then Russia loses at the Manchuria region again. Other than that failure, Albert Einstein publishes a paper around this time, his paper being on the photoelectric effect. I don't know much about it, so that's a thing to do your own research on. Now, we can look at the Simond Tunnel, a tunnelway that goes through the Alps and makes railways easier to build. Also around this time, the Tsar of Russia grants religious freedoms to the people of Russia. Also, the SS America is launched, was the largest ocean liner in the world. China gets rid of their torture methods of Ling Chi and gibbeting. In the coming months, Mother's Day is made a holiday. It becomes this by Anna Jarvis after her mother's passing. This is after the first World Championship for pro wrestling, which of course is held in New York City. But after Mother's Day comes the Snyder, Oklahoma tornado that kills 97 people. This is before the Brownian motion is well described by Albert Einstein. This is also before Gambling Central is made. Las Vegas is bought out and formed, but luckily the Russo-Japanese War may come to an end soon. There may be peace talks in June because Katsuro Taro asks Theodore Roosevelt to make them. But before then, Norway gains full independence from Sweden, kind of. Luckily for them, they can learn about special relativity from Einstein. There's a flooding in Guanajuato in Mexico, but Japan also takes the island of Sakhalin from Russia. But luckily the Taft-Katsura agreement is an option. But luckily this means the war is in sight, because less than a fortnight later, we see peace negotiations begin, but not end. Anyways, we see another Japanese ship go down on the Sea of Japan. Later, we see the actual end of the Russo-Japanese War, a treaty that grants Russia the land of Sakhalin and gives port and rail rights to Japan. Then Einstein puts out another revolutionary idea out there, was E equals mc squared. But before he publishes that, we see an early form of the Bank of China be formed, but we can also be in the air for longer than 30 minutes now. This is done with the Wright Flyer III, but also in this time the Russian Revolution of 1905 starts, so hopefully it's the only one. But on the other side of Russia was the side that lost Korea, becomes a proctor of Japan. This means Japan is protecting Korea. Then in Moscow, the Bolsheviks are kind of suppressed in one of their riots. The French also passed the law of separation of church and state, which actually is really good. After this, you may have time to take Novocaine if you're in pain, I think. I don't know. It's just made during this time, so don't trust this video's advice on that. See the Morocco crisis try to be helped with the Algeciras conference. I did butcher that. This starts in January but doesn't end yet. We also see the start of a naval race between Britain and Germany. This is because the HMS Dreadnought is launched and activated. This is big because you'll see ships pretty soon in European history, and you can kind of guess where they will be. Then sadly, the start of Oklahoma starts as Native Americans are taken out in the Indian Territory area. But the first monoplane, which is similar to the type you see in war, is developed. It can't actually do too many things like a long flight, but it gets off the ground. An earthquake in California happens, but luckily Russian laws are developed in the Duma. The Prime Minister of Sweden steps down because of expanding voter rights, but at least he was able to hear Gustav Mahler's Symphony No. 6 if he actually went to it. Anyways, if you're into racing, you could go to the first Le Mans race in France, with speeds that are just average on any US highway. We also luckily see the Second Geneva Convention happen as well. Maybe people could go on vacation on the RMS Lusitania, the largest ship now for vacationing and other things. But I'm just kidding, because now the largest ship in the world is the RMS Mauritania. But also, there's some division in San Francisco, as Japanese students are for a little while told to be taught in racially segregated schools, which causes a little crisis between the US and Japan in terms of politics. A new plane in France, the Alberto Santos Dumont, is able to fly 60 meters, a new record for now in Europe. Anyways, remember CQD? Yeah, that's gone now. Now it's the infamous SOS distress signal, we all know. In Russia, the agrarian reforms are also made, so that peasants who own a lot of farms can become a big part of the Russian population and have influence. Remember fraternities? One more to add, and that's Alpha Phi Alpha. It's formed in Ithaca at Cornell University. We also see the first feature film be shown in Australia, that being the classic The Story of the Kelly Gang. An earthquake hits Kingston, Jamaica and kills 1,000 or more people. Then later on, the Larchmont collides with the Harry Hamilton in the sea, which kills 183 more people. Then nothing else happens until the Romanian peasants revolt over, and you guessed it, Romania. But luckily the State Duma is opened in St. Petersburg for Russia. Ignore the demonstrators. Also, taxi meters start in London, but you may not want to go to Sudak in Russia since it erupts, and that's not good. Then Hershey Park opens in Pennsylvania, in Hershey. Shocking, right? But also, April 17th, 1907 was the busiest day for immigration on Ellis Island, and the US. Just about 1.1 million immigrants come into the country on this day. Then the conference for the Russian Democratic Labour Party happens in London. But more importantly, the first laundry detergent to be combined with bleach is made in Germany. But at least the packing to Paris is still able to happen, being won this time by Prince Scipione Borghese. Don't know, it seems Italian. Then the Bolsheviks attack a bank and rob it in Tiflis. But also, we see the first electric-powered buses, mainly in London. The SS Columbia sinks as well, but that's not good. Also in Korea is more under Japan's control now due to the Japan-Korea Treaty of 1907. But in good news, not bad news or whatever, other than the Anarchist Congress meeting in Amsterdam, the UPS is formed. The Quebec Bridge also sadly breaks, which is bad since it wasn't really completed yet. Uruguay gets rid of capital punishment, but also New Zealand and Newfoundland become dominions of Britain, meaning that they are their own nations, not part of the creature that is the UK. But this is around the same time Esperanto was chosen to be reformed for the auxiliary language. Another panic is avoided, blah blah blah, whatever. Oklahoma is now the 46th state. That was totally needed. Totally, just look at Oklahoma in every aspect. Gustav V becomes King of Sweden after Oscar II dies, which is a new name, which might be a little weird to get used to in Sweden. Then there's a massacre in Chile. Okay, not good, because they shot at mine workers at the school. Anyways, the first ball drop happens. Oh my gosh! A solar eclipse is able to be seen in the Pacific, and Alpha Kappa Alpha becomes the first race-inclusive sorority. The New York to Paris race takes place, which sounds impossible, which is why half of the people who competed were able to finish it. King Carlos I of Portugal and his son Prince Louis Felipe are killed and assassinated in Lisbon. Japanese immigration to the US is illegal under the Gentleman's Agreement, aka the treaty signed last year. The beta version, or the alpha version, of James Madison University is also made for women in Virginia. But in cool science news, a Neanderthal skeleton is found. An American diplomat, Durham Stevens, is assassinated by two Korean immigrants. They do this because he supported Japan's overgrowing power in Korea and over their people. On 4/20, a rail disaster happened in Melbourne at their Sunshine Railway station. But luckily, we can see the North Pole if we follow the same path that Frederick Cook took. Another solar eclipse can be seen in Central America, North America, and towards Africa. But if you're stuck at sea during the solar eclipse, maybe you could try SOS, which is now an international distress signal. The second person who wants to go to the North Pole, Robert Peary, set sail for it around this time as well. The 1908 Summer Olympics are held in London, and you'll never guess who won. That's right, it's Great Britain. The US did come in second place, though. The FBI is formed in like a foreshadowing measure to what it'll do. A typhoon in Hong Kong sinks the Ying King steamer, which kills 421 people. Washington State also helps make UPS a larger service. Thomas Selfridge is the first person to die in a plane crash, but Orville is able to get out just fine in that crash. I wonder how long the news covered this one for. Benjamin Franklin Institution of Technology also opens in the state known for good colleges, Massachusetts. Luckily in Europe, Bulgaria gained independence from the Ottoman Empire. Bosnia and Herzegovina gets annexed by the Austro-Hungarian Empire from the Ottoman Empire. Then the 1908 US presidential election happens. William Howard Taft wins by almost double the points of his opponent. Anyways, Belgium gained control of part of the Congo, but also China sees its youngest emperor was at being Emperor Puyi. A hybrid solar eclipse was able to be seen in the Atlantic at the end of the year, which is also the coldest year since 1880. This is according to NASA reports on climate, so you can trust it. Panama finally gets recognized by Colombia as an independent country. Anyways, that is big news for them, but some explorers start to go towards the South Pole as well, but once they get there, they may have the wrong location. But also good news for Cuba, the last US troops leave since they've kind of been there since 1898 when the Spanish-American War ended. Then the Anglo-Siamese Treaty of 1909 is signed, which kind of just stated that they lose some territory and protection, but also get a loan to build a railway to South Siam. Anyways, shortwave radio is used in Denmark, which uses radio to use shorter frequency bands rather than longer wave ones, meaning it's kind of like how 5G works. Also, Serbia kind of accepts that Bosnia and Herzegovina is now run by Austria. They kind of don't care. Tel Aviv is also formed, but wait, earthquake in Portugal. Russian ballet is brought to different places in the Western world, but the French take the capital of the Wadi Empire in Africa, so it doesn't matter. But in good news, guys, the International Cricket Conference takes place. This is super cool if you're like in your 50s or something. Someone also flies across the English Channel in an airplane, which means it's about 25 to 30 miles flown, depending on where they flew from. Barcelona gets their tragic week because of an uprising with workers. Wonder what would be going wrong in that city. Hopefully it's fixed soon. But anyways, if not, the US Army has the first military plane to go anywhere, which is given to them by the Wright brothers. The TRF is also formed, which stands for the Rosicrucian Fellowship. Not really a good thing since, all you need to know is they don't really support all people and are generally not good role models. But other than that, Japan, on Japan's side, gets railroad concessions in Manchuria. Suzuki was also formed around this time in Japan. Germans and Italians now get access to the Gotthard rail system in Switzerland, which is an underground train tunnel system near the Alps, I'm pretty sure. I don't know. And the Prime Minister of Japan is dead. Ito Hirobumi is assassinated. Belgium gets a new king as well, and the first man-powered airplane flight is made in the South African city of East London. Of course it's a London. And lastly, we see the polio virus get isolated in full, meaning that it could be used to study for vaccine making and for a cure to it. Overall, the 1900s was an interesting decade, but I wouldn't have time to go over every topic in detail. If you want to learn more about anything that happened, just look up vague words that you heard, and you'll probably find it as long as you have the year. These topics are really, really vague, or specific, so if you put the year after which you want to learn more about, you will probably find it. Please like, subscribe, and comment. Pretty please, LSC.